Let's talk about Balticon 51. Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. I've recently had a bit more drama in my life than I would like. First off, I didn't realize that Balticon was this weekend, in part because I didn't know where I was going to be living. I didn't know if I'd be living in Maryland or Pennsylvania or back to Maryland. A bunch of things have been going on. And work has been very, very challenging. Now, I love my job and I love what I do, and I totally am very happy with the company I work for because they supported me going through cancer in a very supportive way. They gave me a very challenging job. But I didn't realize that Balticon was this weekend, and I couldn't have attended Friday. They actually went through Friday through Monday, but I only went on Sunday. And the first thing you've seen here, this is their guidebook. It's a nice printed color glossy book, which comes with any large convention if you've ever seen one of those. So one of the first things you do when you go, at least when I go to a convention, is you walk into the dealer's room. And they actually had two separate dealer's rooms. So I took some pictures. I asked, always nice to ask first, and I got approval to just show in general what's there. This is some of the jewelry that you see in the convention. There are actually quite a few people making various kinds of jewelry, and I just got one or two pictures of that. Of course, then you have to see, the toys and games. This is in a place that sells books. They have the bookstore there, and a lot of people selling books. Authors who've written them, they're there. Plus, you also have the various books that are going, that they're selling and so on. Then we had the Armour Shop, and I had to get some pictures of the various kinds of armor that they were making. Very shiny. Here's the picture. We build armor to your specifications. They very nice looking stuff. If you haven't seen people making armor, they make armor. They even make some of the, the chainmail and so on. I didn't see any of the chainmail bikinis, but there are places that do that too, if you're into that kind of thing. And so some more of the armor. What was interesting was that somewhat articulated hand that they had there. They were just showing some of their samples of their wares. And some more pictures of armor. This was the first panel that I went to. The title of this panel was How to Avoid Being Pigeonholed in Your Writing. It was an interesting panel. I was not really, at 11 a.m. on Sunday, there weren't that many panels that I found that interesting. I sort of picked this panel because it was in the same room as the next panel, which I really was interesting, which was at 12. I'll talk about that one in a minute. But they were talking about the problems of being pigeonholed, about some authors, and particularly the problems with the big five publishers, that they really don't want to take any chances. They're so risk adverse. And if you know anything about what's going on with publishing, you understand that. I mean, Amazon is the 600-pound gorilla in the room, but they don't want to deal with print unless you want to do print on demand. And they weren't talking too much about electronic publishing that much. They were actually saying that people even having problems getting electronic copies. The author submits a manuscript to a publisher, one of the big five, and they don't want to even give you back an electronic copy of your manuscript that's typeset so you could put it up electronically. They don't want to, they're really, shall we say, they don't understand what's happening to the industry. So that was an interesting panel. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it was not high on my list, but it was interesting. That's the thing about going to a convention. You learn a lot by going to a variety of panels. Now, the next panel, which is one that I was really looking forward to, and it was an interesting panel, but you've got to be a techie to really get this one. The theory and possible practice of FTL, or faster than light. And you got some heavyweights. The lady on the right is Catherine Azzaro, who has a doctorate in physics. She actually wrote a paper on trying to calculate out various possibilities of things around the problem of going faster than light. Actually, the limitation from relatively is you can't go the speed of light, and you run into the problem because there's some infinities there, but they were calculating out some various things like that. And Catherine Azzaro has written some interesting books. I encourage you to look her up. She created her own subgenre, which is romantic science fiction. Yeah, it's a little strange. And yeah, she covers some very unusual topics in her stuff. This was a fascinating panel because they were talking about the various approaches to getting past the problem of how do you go faster than light and working from the mathematics. And you need a little bit of appreciation of math to really understand this panel. It was a lot, but I do, and so I enjoyed this one an awful lot. Let's see. And then we come to the next panel. Now the next panel I get a lot of pictures on. And the next panel, let's see, what did we call, what was it, this one? Now the next panel, Archaeology Roadshow. So let me read the full description. What will future archaeologists make of common 20th century household objects? Panelist looks at the strange objects and determine what their function might have been in a dead alien society. Our panelists take their best guesses. This was a lot of fun. This is very inside humor. You have to be a geek and a science fiction, and it helps if you know anything about the archaeology, paleontology, and because it's just hilarious. Because they bring out a variety of objects and came up with various conclusions about what they were. So the first object it's a pasta spoon. And what they came up with, and there were hilarious things about this. This because you don't know what it is. You find this, you dig this up, and you come up with that. And there were various ideas about what it was. All hilarious, and it really gives you a different view on what people think about archaeology. The next object, I'm not even sure what it is. It's some sort of toy or whatever, and that had some really various hilarious ideas about what it was. Then we had an extension cord, and just talking about if you don't know what it is and what it means and what it's used for, yeah, it's hilarious. And then they had another kind of extension cord, and they obviously think it has a different meaning and so on, and the color became important. And then we had, I think you can barely see from the picture, I think they're eye tweezers or whatever women use for their eyelashes. I believe that was what it was. And there were some strange ideas about that one. I'm not even sure what the next thing was. Anyway, you can see part of it there. They thought it was a hat or something. And trying to figure out what things were. But this was a lot of fun. It was going through all these various topics and, put yourself in the place of someone who is and trying to be an archaeologist, and you find these strange artifacts and you don't know what they were. That was a hoot. If you ever go to a convention and they have one on xenoarchaeology, I highly recommend those type of panels. They're a lot of fun. Okay, got to talk about the con suite. What is a con suite? Most conventions have a con suite as part of your dues that you pay to come in. You have access to the con suite, and the con suite normally has a few things for you to munch on. They normally only have munchies. It's not a place to eat dinner, though people I know have done that. They normally have a veggie plate and some things like apples. They were there. And the con suite, they encourage you not to take food out of the con suite because you're sort of going against the purpose of con suite. Con suite is for you to pick up a few munchies, to meet other people. There's lots of tables for you to sit and talk with, and it's a very interesting place to meet other people and to talk with other people. So I had to, this was their mascot sort of at the con to come in. Do not take food out of the con suite. The next panel I went to was Writing Better Villains. This was a somewhat interesting panel. They were talking about how to make a villain better if you're a writer. I didn't find an awful lot new in this panel. There were some interesting discussions about that, but it was well prepared. They talked about it. The moderator was kind of interesting and had an interesting sense of humor introducing the panelists. It wasn't, this is probably my least favorite panel that was there. It was interesting to listen to, but it was just, there really wasn't anything new I found in this panel. And then the last panel I attended was how much it costs, past and future. And this one was talking about why economics is never mentioned much in science fiction. Many science fiction books don't have that. This was sort of, there were some interesting points in there because it talked about, the description of it talked about, if you've read Horatio Hornblower, and they discussed why in the Hornblower series, Forster, who wrote the Hornblower series, it was always such a big deal for Hornblower, was always worried about his uniform and how much it cost. And they talked a little bit about that, and it was because at the time of Hornblower, which was based upon Lord Admiral Nelson, and if you know anything about science fiction, you know that the Horatio, Honor Harrington from David Weber is based upon actually Lord Admiral Nelson more than on the Horatio Hornblower series. But the Hornblower series is very good. If you haven't read it, I recommend it, as I also recommend the Honor Harrington books. But they talked about the cost, and at the time of Horatio Hornblower, or at the time of Lord Admiral Nelson, which they're based on, it would have cost a fortune to make a uniform for an officer because everything was handmade. You didn't have, you had, the only thing was some of the cloth, but not all of it would have been handmade. Some of the cloth could have been made on a loom, but some of it was actually handmade cloth, which gets extremely expensive. And it's just the amount of effort and cost to do that. And how you see things are changed. And it was the interesting question, which when they skirted around, they didn't want to get into the politics of what it means in the future as the cost of labor becomes expensive, and automation. And we talked some about automation and the interesting discussions about why certain jobs pay well and certain jobs don't pay well, and so on. It was an interesting discussion. There were a bunch of other panels that I wanted to go to, and it was getting late, and I was having bit of melancholy because I was remembering the last time I'd been to Balticon, which was about 15 years ago, when my wife, who passed away, was much healthier, and we had a lot of fun. And it was melancholy to remember all those things. But they're great memories. So I highly encourage you, if you're into science fiction, to go out to some of the local conventions. You'll meet people, you'll make memories that will last a lifetime. Thank you. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.